Hey, this is Joe from Home Studio Corner. In this video, we're going to talk about how to use EQ for the first time. Even if you've used EQ before or you've never touched one in your life, in this video, I want to help give you a little more confidence in how to use it because it's one of those tools that you'll need to learn how to use if you want to continue recording and making music. Just a few moments ago, before starting this video, I grabbed my guitar, I sat in front of this microphone, and I recorded myself singing and playing a song. I put the microphone about right there, and I played and sang. Here's what that sounded like, and we're going to use EQ on this track to teach you how to EQ your first track. Here's what it sounds like.
You know something's wrong with you. Everyone's got more problems than you.
I've been recording music for a little over half my life, and I can tell you there's almost never been an occasion where I've recorded something that didn't need a little bit of EQ. Now, the first piece of advice I can give you is before you ever start talking about using any kind of processing on your audio is make sure the recording itself sounds as good as possible. If you listen and it just sounds distorted or really weird, then maybe just re-record it. Move the mic farther away, for example, and then record it again and listen back. Get it to sound as good as you can, but even if you do that perfectly, you probably will still need some EQ after. So the question is, what do I use EQ for? How do I know where to put it? Well, let's explain EQ really briefly, and then I'll show you how I would EQ this track. So here's an EQ. This is your standard EQ. I'm using Persona Studio One as my software. Really, any recording software you use will have an EQ that looks something like this. So it has these different sections that I can use to boost or cut frequencies. So left to right, left are the lows, right are the highs, and each of these little bands, they're called, allows me to boost or cut certain groups of frequencies. If you've ever played with the radio in your car, turning up the treble, turning down the bass, that's this. It's just a little more advanced and lets you do that a little more selectively, a little more surgically, and have a little more control over the sound. So before we dive in and tell you what to use on the EQ, I don't think that's actually as important as this point. What don't you like about the recording? What is it about the recording that doesn't sound like all your favorite recordings? If you can put your finger on that, you have done the bulk of the work when it comes to EQ. Because just running in and grabbing some knobs and just turning things randomly, not going to be great for you. However, coming in and saying, you know what? There's some weird like boominess to that track that I don't like. I want to get rid of that. Now we have a task that we can achieve with EQ. So let's listen to this again and imagine you're sitting in front of me and I'm playing a song for you, as awkward as that would be. Hey, shut up and listen to my song. But let's just imagine that's happening. What do you imagine that sounds like? You're sitting, across the table from me or a few feet away, and I start playing for you. What does that sound like? What do you expect that to sound like? And then as we listen to this track again, what's different from the way you expect to hear guitar and vocal and the way we actually hear it in this track? That difference is where we're going to attack this track with some EQ. Okay? So let's listen to it again.
You know something's wrong with you. Everyone's got more problems than you. You got a speck in your eye. Never mind this plank in mine. Plank is mine.
Do you have a guess? Here's what I hear. When I listen to this, let me grab my EQ again. I hear a vocal and a guitar, but I also hear this woo, 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 woo sort of a sound. If we hit play and just look at this EQ, we can actually see where it's happening. This, if I mute the music for a second, you can see right here. See how that's jumping up? It's like a little volume that's louder than everything else, kind of in this range. What happens if we just boost that and listen to it real quick? Yeah, that's the sound that I'm hearing. It's not natural. It's what happens when the microphone is fairly close to the guitar. If we move it too far away, it's too far from my voice, and it picks up too much of the room. If we move it way too close, it gets like boomy and disgusting. But at a decent distance, there's still a little bit of that extra woo that gets picked up by the microphone. And it's actually an easy thing to fix with EQ. So when we listen to the raw recording again, we hear that boom, boom.
You know something's wrong
Hold on real quick, I'm going to help us hear that a little bit better. Okay, I'm using a different plugin that allows me to isolate those frequencies for just a second. Don't worry about this plugin, it's not the focus of today's video, but listen to this. Boo, boo, boo. That's the sound that needs to be dealt with EQ. So how do we do it? It's actually really simple. We hear that this is too much, so we just pull it down. It really is that simple. I'm a big fan of a subtractive approach to EQ, meaning treat it instead of like silly putty, or not silly putty, Play-Doh, where I'm building something and I can always add more Play-Doh onto the thing to make it better. I think of it as a marble sculpture, where it is a block, and the only way to get it to look like the statue of David is to remove pieces until the statue emerges. That's the way I like to think about EQ, I'd say 8 times out of 10. There's usually a problem I want to get rid of versus something nice that I want to enhance. So the very obvious problem here is that woo, 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 kind of dog barking sort of a sound. So let's use EQ to find it by boosting until it sounds terrible on that woo, woo, and then we'll pull that down. Here we go. Let's do it right now.
You know something's wrong with you. Everyone's got more problems than you.
This sounds like I'm sitting in front of myself. How narcissistic is that? Listening to myself play guitar. That little woo, woo, woo just got in the way. I pull it down. I can hear the voice more clearly. The voice still sounds warm, the guitar still sounds warm, but now that weirdness that was in the way is now gone. And I would say this is maybe all this track needs. It just needed that to get out of the way. Now it feels delightful. Let's listen to it again.
You know something's wrong with you. Everyone's got more problems than you. Got a speck in your eye. Never mind this plank in mine. The plank in mine. And I'm panicking.
All right. So that is my very, very simple introductory guide to EQ. And I'll tell you a secret. A lot of times when you're recording, it's this kind of an EQ that the track needs. Vocals, they can get a little boomy. Guitars can get a little boomy. Electric guitars can get a little boomy. Pianos can get a little boomy. There tends to be this, it's called the low mids. It's not the deep low end bass notes necessarily, but it's those low mids around anywhere between 100 and 300 hertz where those problems tend to pop up, and they tend to be the bane of the beginner's existence when it comes to making music. So go try this. Record something and find, I bet you it'll have a little bit of too much of this frequency. Go pull it down a little bit, and then that might be all you need to do to get it to sound great. Thanks so much for watching this. If you want to learn more about how to mix, if you really want to dive into mixing, I've got a 5-step mixing guide that's absolutely free. You can grab that at 5stepmix.com. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.